Wonderful wines open, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Clovis and Vitalie Taittinger to the show. I'm sorry for butchering your name. In English, you must hate that. People say Taittinger, but if you say Taittinger, it sounds so presumptuous and sort of affected, so I never know what to do. But anyway, thank you for being here. We've got some wonderful wines to taste. I also want to welcome all of our viewers watching from all over the place. And the goal with these seminars has been this lockdown, which unfortunately continues in most parts of the world, is to really bring people together and to have some really wonderful conversations around wine. And to that end, I'd like everybody to, if you've got questions, these seminars are really for you. So to our audience, if you've got questions, please give them to us. And the earlier you give them to us, the earlier we can weave them into the discussion. So Clovis and Vitalie, thanks so much for being here, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Antonio. It's a pleasure for us.
It's more of a pleasure to taste in Reims, but it's not possible now.
No. For us, it is.
But we know Clovis has to leave at a certain point because you've got to get home before the curfew in Paris, which is a very serious thing. So we don't want to...
Unfortunately, yes, we are, as you said, we are all living strange circumstances, and but whatever we think, we have to accept the times, and I'm sure, we are sure that there will be better times as well.
Yeah, I'm sure also. So what is the mood like there in Reims? You just finished up your harvest. How did that all go?
The harvest, a little bit, we feel that it's now a little bit behind us because we started very early this year. It was in August and it finished at the beginning of September. So we have the impression to be almost at Christmas. It's really a weird year, but it has been beautiful harvest. And we are happy about the quality, which was something very important in this year because we needed something positive.
No, it's actually, it will be a wonderful year. It's 3 wonderful years in a row, 18, even more 19 and 20 as well. It looks very promising.
That's good. And this is a year where we need good news. So I love it. It'd be good to have some positive things coming out of this year, which I'm sure there will be. So we've got some wines to taste, but I think it might be interesting for folks who are tuning in and watching this to hear a little bit about the history of Comte de Champagne. It's your tête de cuvée. I was really lucky, I think about 15 years ago, a friend of mine opened a huge selection of these wines, like all the way back to the 70s. And I've always loved the way your wine ages. I think it's a very unique wine for Champagne, but maybe for people who don't know the history, maybe you could tell us a little bit about this, about your wine and how it came to be.
Maybe I will let Clovis start. Because...
No. She's the president, she's she needs to start, but no.
But he is my grandbrother.
It looks like a balance of power. It's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Very balanced.
No, she has the power, and I'm very happy, grateful for that.
I would love to have the power.
But
but both inherited your dad's sense of humor, though, so that's good.
But for us, the Comte de Champagne is really one of the cement of our history. It's a wine which is already one of the oldest wine we are making. As you know, we are still a young family. It's a 3-4 generation family company, and we started in the middle of the 30s. Then we really took off after the Second World War, and we took off on a couple of things, but basically because of the style of Taittinger, we were the first, let's say, to make our champagne, in a certain way. We call it today the Chardonnay way, the feminine way. But in the 30s, it was a revolution, to make champagne mostly partly from Chardonnay. It was very rare. And after the Second World War in 1952, we created our second cuvée, which was the Comte de Champagne Blanc de Blanc, which was probably the best Blanc de Blanc ever made in the modern era of champagne. So after the Second World War, And for a lot of people, to make a Blanc de Blanc was a kind of novelty. Nobody knew that that it can be made and so on. And we did dedicated this Blanc de Blanc to Thibaut IV, Count of Champagne, who was a legendary aristocrat from Champagne in the 13th century. One of the most, I would say, one who financed the Cathedral of Reims, who financed the Abbey of Saint-Nicaise, where we are now, who financed also a lot of monuments, around France and also in Spain, because he was also King of Navarre. And the Comte de Champagne is said, together with his army, to have brought back, among other things, to have brought back the ancestor of the plant of Chardonnay in Champagne, back from the Crusade, back from the land of Israel, Palestine, all the Mediterranean land, because Chardonnay is originally from Mediterranean, South Mediterranean country, and he planted it in Champagne, and we said to ourselves, let's dedicate our life to the Comte de Champagne history, legend. Let's focus our style on the Chardonnay, and let's make the best Blanc de Blanc ever made, at some point, focusing on the best terroirs of Champagne, only the 5 Grand Crus of the Côte des Blancs, which are
Avise, Chuy, Cramant, Ménil-sur-Roger, and Auger.
That's a test. The test question.
It's a team.
And it becomes, along the way, one of the most, probably one of the most revered and one of the most, I would say, iconic wine of Champagne, wine of France as well. And still today, it's, I would say, it's one of the reference when we talk about great tête de cuvée.
And for us, it's also the wine with the one we are really traveling into the time. The time is probably the most important grape in the Comte de Champagne. And it's also for us something which forces us to be very modest. We will introduce you the 2008. It has been made by our father, Pierre-Emmanuel, just 2 years after rebuying the company. So it's a lot of emotion. It's only the 2nd year of his presidency at the house, and he is not here today to introduce it himself. So for us, it's really a kind of time illustration.
Yeah, and so you talked about something you sort of glossed over, but I think it's very important. Tell us a little bit about the history, about the history of Taittinger, but also how your dad brought it back, because it's very important to what's happening now. So how did that all happen?
But I think it's maybe the following history after the Comte de Champagne. There is some adventure in the roots of Taittinger, definitely. And this house, which was owned by the family since the beginning of its creation, has been sold to an American firm, Starwood. And for my father, it has been kind of impossible to live with. And since the first day it has been sold, it has been a kind of evidence that he would have to fight to rebuy it or to take it back in Champagne and maybe in family. So for 1 year, we saw, Clovis and I, our father secretly fighting to build a kind of project with partner to be able to rebuy the Champagne. And fortunately for all of us, he succeeds. So for us, it has been the beginning, a new beginning for the company, our beginning too, because since that day we are working with our father. And I think each year we are learning, and each day. It has been also for the rest of the company something huge, because it's very powerful in terms of soul, in terms of sense. It gives a direction to all we are doing every day. So it's a passion adventure.
Right, and that happened in 2006, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes.
End of 2006. End of 2006.
July. It has been signed in July. So the first harvest of my father has been in 2006.
Yeah, 2006. I
As
get the year.
president.
Yeah, so now Taittinger are back to being a family-owned maison, which was not the case for a period of time, and I think it's important to note that.
Very important.
Yeah, so let's get into wine. One of my favorite tastings every year in March is at Taittinger, because you taste the Vin Clair with your winemaking team, and then there's always a few vintages of Comte de Champagne, both the Blanc and the Rosé. Often there's some older vintages, but you do a tasting which I really like a lot, which you call the Futurotech. So
Yes.
a lot of champagne houses now are into this Vinotech or Enotech or sort of late release, which is interesting. But one of the things I like about visiting with you is that we taste a lot of the Comte de Champagne that are not released yet in their trial disgorgements. And one of them is this wine, which I tasted the first time maybe 4 or 5 years ago, in 2008. People often ask me why I don't make wine. And one of the reasons is that the time cycle is too long. This wine was made 12 years ago. I don't even remember what I was doing 12 years ago. So tell us a little bit about this vintage, because it's a very unique vintage for champagne. What is it about 2008 that for you is special?
2008 has been a really great year. It has been at the same time a warm year and a fresh year, so very good balance. And at the end, I think that this balance and this contrast also, because it has been at the same time warm and in the same cold, this balance give a very good contrast also to the wine. And we can find this balance and contrast in the wine. Also, I will let Clovis complete, because I'm opening the bottle with difficulty.
No, but I could have done that, Vitalie, but from what I remember as well, it's been a very long period of harvest, which lasts almost 1 month, which is quite unusual these days in Champagne. And we reach a very good maturity, very good maturity, but with perfectly very clean, very healthy, very healthy grapes, and which 2008 is a year which is characterized by its freshness. It's a very good tension within the wine, very good pureness,
minerality.
Yeah, and if you also, I don't know the word in English, but a kind of saltiness as well, saltiness within the wine. But I would say, we are not. You are the specialist, Antonio, because you've tasted all the champagnes and from all the grand marks and so on. But definitely, it's one probably for a reason. For all those reasons, it has been considered to one of the best vintage, over the last maybe 20-30 years. After maybe sometimes we say it's overrated or underrated and so on. So it's difficult for us to judge exactly, or to compare with the other vintages. But from the general opinion, it is said to be also a great year.
Yeah, I think you touched on something that I think is really the signature of this vintage, which is that maybe it is because the weather, a year that was both cooler and warm, but these wines just have incredible balance, and they have the energy of a really bright vintage, but they have really good richness in the middle. and is not as opulent as 2002, for example, which was very tropical. It's much more sort of reserved, but it's not super focused like '04 either. It's got a little bit more, curves, a little bit,
and you have a beautiful structure.
Yeah,
very, very strong one.
'06 is pretty opulent also. So I think it's but I think that this is true. You mentioned, Clovis, before about sort of the quality across the sort of spectrum of champagne, and this is true of all of the great 08s that they have. To me, anyway, they have this combination of energy, but also they're really nice and full, for young wines, and so that you can enjoy this wine younger. I mean, of course, it will be delicious in 10 or 15 or 20 years, even 30 years for Comte, I'm sure. But, a lot of your colleagues' wines and your wine, if you opened a bottle tonight, it's not a bad thing at all. Whereas there's some other vintages where you think you really want to wait a little bit. And so I think it's the balance of this vintage that is one of the reasons why a lot of people rate the vintage highly, including me. I just think the wines have this harmony. And this to me was evident when I tasted this wine the first time, which would have been 4 or 5 years ago, probably. It's just immediately, you get, I mean, to me anyway, immediately there's just a harmony. And I think it's a signature of great wine that it's basically, a lot of people will say this, that, the great wines, they're born great, they're always great. They change, but you can tell right away.
What strikes me the most when I drink this wine or when I smell this wine, it's really this, which is very, let's say, unusual sometimes for Comte. It's this impression of fullness, of, you know what I mean? It seems full in the nose, which is quite rare, within the Comte de Champagne. Sometimes, as you mentioned, you said, the wine, the Comte de Champagne, the style is quite strict, and not very opulent, and not very opulent. And this wine is a bit more opulent and more full on the nose, but a bit more. But when you taste it, it's very still very lean, very racy, It's really it's very well balanced,
Tell us a little bit about how this wine is produced technically. So 5 Grand Cru Chardonnays, the core, and then how's it actually vinified?
What?
How's it produced? It's done in steel, correct?
Yeah. Most of the 99.99% of the total production of Taittinger are matured and produced in stainless steel vat. The Comte de Champagne has a little exception. Maybe 5% of the wines will mature approximately 3 months in relatively young
1 year, 2 year, and 3 year old barrels, and on the cru of Chouilly.
Only so it's really a very, very, very minimal portion of the wines that will mature a very short time in the small oak vats, but the rest, as you said, so it's really a long. We tend to play on we tend to seek only the purity of the Chardonnays. So we don't put them, we don't want to touch them too much, or we don't want to touch them at all. We want to stay true to the fruit, true to the
origin of the
inner
taste,
to the inner characteristic of the fruit, and that's why we have among those 5 villages, we have first of all a strict selection, because we don't make Comte de Champagne every year, it's only on the best year, and only on the best year for Chardonnay. For example, it can be a great year for Pinot Noir, but not for Chardonnay, and we won't do a Comte de Champagne Blanc de Blanc, but we could also do a Comte de Champagne Rosé, for example. For example, 2011 was, let's say, a complex year for a complex year for Champagne in general, but was a very good year for Chardonnay. So we will release, I think, a great Blanc de Blanc in 2011. But
it has been the same for 2007. You remember?
Yes.
but that's but again, you know, again, what we look is really for a top quality, a top freshness, a top tension, to find the right recipe as well, the right balance. So we mostly play in generally, you know, we have the two core terroirs are Avis and Ménil-sur-Roger. Those are really the key generally the key stones of the wines, and the rest, of course, of Cramant, Chouy, and we can change sometime, of course, but we try to play on those key terroirs, and then after to let the time do the rest. For us, it's really a good selection, no compromise, and a long time. And then after, you know, we discover 8, 9, 10 years afterwards what the wine will be. But generally, you know, we I think over the years we have well anticipated the future quality of our wines. It means that the Taittinger wines, and especially the Comte de Champagne, are known to evolve very well, and to be drinkable now, but to evolve very well within the time.
Yeah. So, and what's your approach to malolactic fermentation?
We are doing the malolactic fermentation. We know that it's not the case everywhere, but for us it's important. And for all our wines, and for the Comte de Champagne, it's important too. So we have a very classical vinification, as we could say. But what makes really the secret of the Comte de Champagne is probably the provenance of the grapes. We are on those 5 villages. We are which are very precise in terms of organoleptic concept, and which are very pure, because for us, if we want to age a wine, it has to be pure at the beginning and very clean. So we are on that profiles of cru. And also what is important is the fact that we are only on the wine of cuvée, only first pressed juice. So we have this pureness of the juice at the beginning. And of course, we are on the Ferrari when the blending is finished. We have the impression to be very, very, very precise and in energy, super, super strong. So the time is, of course, an asset for this wine, because it develops the complexity of everything, and also with those 5% vinified for a few weeks in old barrels, we obtain those wonderful touch of toastiness and everything, which are very precious for the Comte de Champagne, and which are also a kind of signature.
Yes. Now I'll come back to that in a second, because I want to ask you something. But is it only those 5 Grand Crus, or is there sometimes there's
no,
other...
just those 5.
Yeah.
It's very very close in terms of casting, and and you have 2 very big pillars. You have Ménil-sur-Roger and Avis, and after the rest are like bringing some elements, but you have 2 columns. They are really the pillars of the Comte de Champagne.
Not bad for pillars. Avis. No.
Beautiful legs.
Okay, well, I can't say that. I'd get in trouble. So let's talk about, you mentioned that toasty character that Comte has. I think part of it is probably the barrel, but you also give your wine much longer time in aging than a lot of your peers. In fact, I think there's only 1 or 2 Tête de Cuvées from 2008 that aren't released yet. Most of them have been out. So has that always been the case? Has that always been the case? Has that always been part of the philosophy of Comte so long?
Yeah, always. I mean, we tend to say, that we we tend to believe that our wine are not perfect, too early, I mean, if we release it at 7 years, when they are 7 years old, it's far too young. I mean, for all Chardonnay champagnes, all of them, not only the Taittinger ones, but they need more time to
express
to express themselves and to get a certain kind of maturity. So 10 years is generally a minimum, but let's say between 12 years, 10 years, there is no strict rules, but but not 7 years.
This one, the 2008, and I think it was the same for 2002. It really deserves to age, and I think now it's a wine which is ready to be released. But you were right telling that we can wait also. It's not a crime to wait.
No, in fact, I mean, my readers will know this, but a lot of times when people say, what wines should I buy for the year of the birth of my kids, or what wines should I buy for the year that I got married, and so on and so forth, Comte de Champagne is always one of the ones that I think about, just because the wine will age for decades, and I've had those wines, and I can say that for your wine, but and I can say that for a lot of wines, but I can't say them for a lot of other wines. So I always love, it's just not possible always, especially not in today's world and our pace, although I think this global health crisis is going to change our pace of life, but that'll be a positive, I think. But it's not always possible to age wines for decades. But when you taste one of these wines that is a little bit older, it's really an incredible experience. But both the Blanc and the Rosé. So if you to everybody watching, if you can cellar these wines, you're not going to be disappointed.
Never.
In fact, when I opened the 99, just like a few minutes, I opened it maybe an hour before we started this. I was really impressed by it. We're going to get to that in a second, but let's talk about 07, because this is a vintage that has, I think gone a little bit under the radar in Champagne, probably because everybody was waiting for 2008, and the best 2006s have this incredible immediacy where the wines are just delicious to drink. Obviously, it's a warmer vintage and the wines are really explosive. So between 06, which is a very obvious vintage, and 08, which everybody was waiting for, I think a lot of people did not really spend a lot of time thinking about 07. And I've always loved this wine, as our readers know, but it's obviously a very different vintage. So tell us about this year and why this wine is the way it is.
Have you like 2007? I think the first very good memory was probably with you, Antonio, because when you were in Champagne to the annual for the annual tasting, you arrived with the kind of you were in doubt with 2007. I don't know if you remember well.
No, I don't remember. I was in love with 2007.
Yeah. So for us, it was not only a challenge because we were totally convinced about the quality of this 2007, but we were also proud because it has been a vintage, as you said, with a bad press. And most of the time, it's a little bit hard to arrive with such vintage and to just speak about it and to make people love it. But with the Comte de Champagne Blanc de Blanc, it's a kind of obvious that we have in this vintage the best of the expression of the Chardonnay, the best of the tension. You have a wine which is very straight, really clean, really elegant, very sober. And it has been a wonderful not surprise because, as Clovis told, when we are doing it, we are about 1888 confident, but it has been a very good surprise. And the year has been quite complex to work with. And the harvest has been also because it has been kind of harvest very rare in 2 times. So people, they come to harvest to pick the grapes. And this is not the perfect moment. So they are here, but you have to tell them to stop. So you keep them without making them work. So it's kind of tricky question, but it has been a very good decision made, because finally this Comte de Champagne has been possible because we have waited the maturity of the Chardonnay, and this is it has been a year for the Chardonnay. So I think it was a good idea to continue and to decide to do it.
I think also one of the very noticeable thing, you know, regarding 2007, even 2009, 1999. These are two wines which at the beginning they flew a little bit under the radar, and they were maybe considered, you know, as a bit slim, as maybe too tight. You know what I mean? They are still very tight, you know, when you drink them today. But those are probably the wines among the wines that will probably age the best over the years. You know, they have the precision, they have the finesse, they have the tightness as well. You know, they are not opulent, they are not rich, but they are so Comte de Champagne. And this is 2007 is really for me a perfect expression of what Comte de Champagne can be in terms of finesse, in terms of freshness, in terms of elegance. And it's not overly, I would say, perfumed or flavored, or the aromas are not big. And in fact, you know, one of the trademark of Taittinger, you know, is really on kind of whatever we do, you know, it can be Comte de Champagne, Prélude Grand Cru, wines, and so on. We like to do, let's say, very discreet wines, you know, very soft wines. You know, we are not all about the power, all about the I would say very flattering perfumes and so on. We are really into discretion, into finesse. And 2007, 2009, even 2008, of course, although it's a little bit more ample, a little bit more rich, we have this very this finesse as I would say as a common denominator for all wines. And 2007 as well, you know, it's a little thing, but it's one of the earliest harvest we ever encountered in Champagne. You know, as you know, the traditional period to harvest for Champagne for life has been, you know, October and September, you know, or September and October. But since few years, you know, we are encountering some early harvest. And indeed, 2007, I think it was the second or the third time of the Champagne life that we started to harvest in August. I think it was the very last day of August. And if you think today, if I'm not making any saying any mistakes, if you think today, like 15 years after, or like 13 years after, the last 3 years, 3 of the last 4 years, we started to harvest in August. So it means also that there is also a change in the climate. Change in the climate, which is not to be, of course, neglected. But it's really 2007 was one of, I think, was the second year we started to make.
In August.
Yeah.
At the end of August.
Yeah. I mean, I'm amazed how, I mean, I think it's a good thing, but I'm amazed how tight this wine is. I didn't expect that it would be so closed. I think it was much more open when we tasted it a couple of years ago, you know, and it's really rigid. I don't think that's going to be a problem in time, but I'm amazed how tightly wound it is. I mean, today, the 08 is much more expressive than the 7, which you wouldn't think necessarily, but it is.
I mean, you're right. But that's why also probably the 7, you know, if you look, we cannot predict what will be the future, but if you look further, probably the 7 would be one of the most wonderful vintage, you know, for the old wines, in terms of old wines, because it will never it will never become humble. It will never become rich. You know, it will keep its inner characteristics. And of course, it's a bit too early to say, but I think it's one of the best value, you know, for the future. Such as also you will see 1999, 07, and probably 11 as well. Will be years, you know, to keep a very long time in the cellars, and probably they will be forever very promising.
Yeah, so we have this one, which is the 99, which I'm just surprised how young it is, honestly.
I feel very, very egoistic.
Yeah.
I have the impression that we are the only one to have it.
Oh, yeah. Because it's a really good example. I mean, the wine is obviously 21 years old, and it has those early notes of maturity like coffee and ginger and sort of complex notes. But I mean, this wine will be great for another 20 years easy. I mean, I'm just amazed because 99 is another vintage that you don't really hear people talk about too much. There's some really nice wines that I've had from the vintage, but it's not certainly on most people's top of the list of champagne vintages to seek out. And this wine is so young. I mean, it's just incredible.
It is incredible, and if I do remember, you know, if I do remember, as a personal story, for me it's been my first. The first vintage of Comte de Champagne I ever sold as a salesman, and I think it's been really the first time of my life I got of my, I would say, champagne life, I got such an emotion. You know, I found it was so pure. The bubbles, you know, were absolutely flying within your mouth and so on. I rarely had, you know, such an impression, you know, again, you know, when after the years when I discovered 1999. For me, it's been wonderful. 1999, I think it's also a year where we are clearly seeing a new era of champagne, you know, with a temperature which is slightly higher than what we used to have before. You know, we had a very mild winter, you know, and a very warm and also rainy spring. And at the end, you know, we had a very, I would say, we had a very good and very dry summer, you know, which led to a very perfect maturity. And at the end, it's a very balanced, very good year. Yes, with this floral characteristic, you know, for the Chardonnay, and so on. And it's often a vintage which is compared to 1982 and 1988. So with a very straight, very discreet aromas, very discreet, and also something which will evolve very well within the time, you know.
Well,
what do you think about it, you, Antonio?
Well, I mean, you know, one of the things is, you know, when I taste wine like this, my first feeling is I wish everybody in the world could had an opportunity to taste a wine like this, or to experience, you know, what aged champagne is. This isn't even that old relative to what it could be, but you know, I think there's some wines that really inform your own culture and knowledge of wine. And I think one of the really big risks for younger people today is that some wines have gotten so expensive that we have a whole generation of people who are growing up without having tasted benchmark wines of Burgundy, of Bordeaux, of Piedmont, of Champagne, because they get into a price where people can't afford them. And so that's, I think, one of the reasons why a lot of people have turned to other regions where you can acquire that knowledge. and I really believe a lot in the classics. I believe in the classics of, literature and art and music and fashion. I mean, I just think things that are classic never go out of style. And when you have a chance to taste an older vintage like this, just like I had many years ago to taste the wines from the 70s, I think it really gives you perspective on like what the great wines of the world are supposed to be like. And so, I mean, I think this wine is showing beautifully. It may not be like the most epic older vintage, but I think for understanding how wines age, how they evolve in a positive sense, what aromas they pick up, because you do have this wonderful aromatic complexity, but the wine is still very, very fresh and vibrant. It's not at all tired. And I think that's one of the magic things of Champagne is the way that it can age and evolve over a lot of time, but it's very rare with a great Champagne to find it really tired. It just has different stages of life.
Oh,
And, so I think this wine is showing really beautifully, but it's very much middle aged. You have, as I said, those sort of coffee and really beautiful dried flower kind of notes. But I mean, this wine, I think it's in a good cellar. It's going to age at least another 20 years. And so thanks for sharing it. I think it's beautiful. And I think it's always fun to taste these wines from vintages that are a little bit forgotten for a number of reasons. One, it's a nice surprise. Two, a lot of these wines, I haven't checked on 99, but a lot of times these wines, they get forgotten and then they're sort of in the market and they're priced really well relative to wines from more desired vintages. And I think that sometimes there's an opportunity to go in and pick up some of these wines that are a little bit more favorably priced. So I think it's fun to taste 99, and so thank you.
No, I think we really shared tonight, of course, two new vintages, 07 and 08, but also 1999. It's really a hidden gem, hidden treasure of Taittinger. And you said something, very important, Antonio. You said something about the classicism of wines, the classicism of our wines as well. And it's, we, for my sister and I, and for our team as well, that you know perfectly, we really try always to, first of all, to never compromise on quality of the grapes, quality of the method, the process, the method we are growing the grapes and so on. But also, we never compromise on what we want to do or what we want to express. What we want to express, what we want to do is not to impress anyone. We just want to make great wines, which are the most perfect, the most timeless, the most ourselves, I would say, without trying to lie, by insisting on the XY characteristics or trying to put a bit on makeup on this or a bit of makeup of that. For us, it's really we're not perfect for everything, and they are always,
we are perfect for nothing.
But
That's all of us.
Yeah, but we have rooms to we have lots of rooms to improve. But really, we always try to keep a common sense when we make wines. We strive for perfection. We strive for what we believe in, and that's for us very very important. And we believe in very very pure wines with very true wines. We believe in very classic wines in a good sense, with lots of finesse, lot of elegance, which is for us champagne, and that's all, very modestly.
No, that's great. Let's take some questions. We have a few minutes left, and I know you have to run, Clovis, but I don't want you to get fined. But I'd love to just take a few questions from our viewers. So just in terms of the releases, so we tasted 08 Blanc, and then there's an 08 Rosé, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And that is coming out when?
maybe at the beginning it was more in March, but we postponed a little bit, and probably in May or June it will depend about what we see.
We see the world is the vision is very hard to get right now of the world. That wine, it also ages really beautifully. How is that wine made? The rosé.
This is Clovis. You want? I will let Clovis, because after he will have to leave.
Yeah, I have the cover for you. I need to put again the mask.
Yeah.
If not, this is a jail for him.
No, she will be happy. But the rosé for Taittinger, first of all, it's a long history as well. But we always choose, as you perfectly know, the blending method, assemblage method, which consists in mixing, our wines, our base wine with a bit of red wine from Pinot Noir, from Champagne. Those are for the Comte de Champagne Rosé. We are still on a blend only of Grand Cru of Chardonnay, Grand Cru of Pinot Noir, plus also a red wine, which is also made from the Pinot Noir, but also Grand Cru from Champagne. The blends, the main terroirs at stake are Gouzy and Ambonnay and Mailly for the Pinot Noir. Ambonnay mostly for the red wine, for the red wine, and also that's very much our characteristic. So it's a very I would say complex and also rich. I would say initially rich rosé, which tend to evolve very well within the time. Because again, what you make at day one is not to make it perfect for the second day. We need to anticipate 10 years of aging, and this is the most tricky or difficult things to do when you make champagne. It's not to think for today; it's to think for tomorrow. And today, the Comte de Champagne Rosé is known as probably one also of the best rosé in Champagne. But it also meets a great success. And the 08 will come next year.
And we are still in a proportion about 30% Pinot Noir and 70% Chardonnay, which is not totally faithful if we compare to the origin of Comte de Champagne Rosé, which was more focused on the Chardonnay. But we are progressively returning to the past. But what is interesting with the rosé at Taittinger is probably the sensuality of the wine. I think that we have a strong structure with the Pinot Noir and strong matière. You really have a beautiful red or sometimes black fruit with a certain consistency, and which is a very good wedding with the energy of the Chardonnay, and the time mixed that with such a good magie. You have the impression at the end to have kind of a very elegant dust of Pinot Noir, and to have still this beautiful youth of the Chardonnay, which confers to the wine something very, very elegant but very sensual.
So that's 30% still Pinot Noir. That's quite high. That's good. That's interesting.
Mm.
Yeah. Antonio, I will unfortunately excuse myself. The cover view is not waiting.
No, I know. No, you don't want to.
You are the only one to be able to excuse you. But
Antonio, I wish you and all your family and all the viewers to tonight. I would say all the very best, and and don't worry, we are remaining positive people with positive drinks, positive wines, and we'll continue.
That's great. Thank
So I
you.
think it's a
Vitalie and I will stay on.
And be careful with your car.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm not a friend with the train, but Clovis with the car is a little bit.
So Vitalie, we touched a little bit before, but on the subject of climate change, but obviously it's a big issue all over the world in Champagne. How does it affect Champagne and Chardonnay and Pinot Noir? Has it affected the way that you use dosage in the wines or your harvest dates?
Of course, but for us, the dosage is a question you are considering at the first beginning when you create your wine, because I think this is not the main issue. This is something which has to finally make you obtain the project you want. And for the Comte de Champagne, it's a good question. I think it's important to tell about it. At the beginning, the Comte de Champagne, it was dosed very high. I think it was when we arrived at Taittinger, it was 12. Yeah. So now we reduced a lot, but because we are on very warm years, because the matière is more rich, and finally the dosage is here to make the wine appears as something easily drinkable, and it's also wonderful to be able to age the wine super well. So we adapt the dosage, but most often people they are waiting for us to adapt it very often, but it's not the aim, because climate is changing. We are all okay with that, and this is a truth. But after, it's not changing all the year in a certain. I think we have a base. The crus are as they are, and we have a lot of acidity, as you know, with the Chardonnay of the Grand Cru de la Côte des Blancs. So for us, it's a balance, and it's not a philosophy. You know, yeah. It's something.
So if you were at 12-ish before, where would you say the recent vintages? What's the range that we would expect to find for dosage in Comte de Champagne today?
I think today it's about we are at 9, and I think probably we are not seeing a big changing. So I think we will probably continue on that line, but. You know, we have to be very humble, because we don't know. We are just starting to taste the wine of this year. So we will. But last year, I think. No, I think for the moment we are here.
Around 9.
And after, I think you were also the one who told us to put it on the label.
Oh yeah, probably.
I can tell about that also. No, but I think that this is a topic which is over expressed, because finally it doesn't have to be a question for the people. They are drinking a glass of champagne. A champagne is good. A champagne have beautiful flavors or not. When you are filling the sugar, this is a bad dosage. So I think this is the only truth with dosage.
So 408, for example, what was the dosage? I don't remember.
408. We are at 9.
Okay. And for the two, we have a question from Scott about 2009 vintage. Are there Comte de Champagne and Comte de Champagne Rosé in 2009?
No.
Neither.
You will be sad, but
neither. You didn't make either.
Not today, but it's like that. I think that we are lucky when we can make a Comte de Champagne. 2008, it was a beautiful year, so maybe we have been punished after. No, I don't know. It's like that, but the next one will be the 2011, which is not a good press year. But we are super confident also with this wine. So sometimes, you know, we can play on year which are not obvious, but when it's bad, it's bad.
Well, I don't know that it's bad, but okay. So no 09 Comte or Blanc, but there will be an 11 Blanc, so that'll be interesting. I remember that from our last tasting. It's just that it was a year and a half that's gone by since I was at your place. What about, there's a big trend right now to do a lot of late disgorged versions. Do you have any plans to do a late disgorged comp? Sam asks.
On this topic for the disgorgement, we have now we are playing with two philosophies. We don't want we have the historical one, and I think when we are releasing a Comte de Champagne, we are making kind of session, and those session it depends the number of bottles we produce, but we are about some 4, 6, 8 sessions, and the majority of the bottles they are released are historically disgorged, because this is really the project we believe in. So we don't want to make another one.
So when you say 4 to 6, 8 sessions, does that mean 4 to 6 or 8 releases of the same wine?
I think we are not producing everything in one. So you have maybe a session, and one month after another session of disgorgement.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. So okay. We are playing into 1 year in many sessions, but the philosophy is to have an historical disgorgement for the Comte de Champagne. And the second philosophy is to keep some bottles non-disgorged, to be able to follow the evolution of the Comte de Champagne totally pure without any dosage. But after, for the moment, no project about a late disgorgement. And to my mind, it could not be, it would not be a very good one. I think, and it doesn't make any interest for us. But this is our point of view.
All right. So for a wine like the 2008, it has been disgorged in some arc of time. You have some bottles in the cellar that are non-disgorged.
Yes.
And then the rest is the commercial release, correct?
And yes, and when it arrives on the market, it has about 8 to 10 months of disgorgement.
Okay. More or less.
And very often more, because the time to travel, the time to be stocked, the time to so on.
Yeah, the wine needs time to recover, and your wine especially, because it's so, it can be austere and due.
But you really need this time after disgorgement.
Yeah, for the wines to recover. Well, I think that's great. I think we've gotten through a bunch of questions. It's been really interesting. Obviously, thanks so much for being on, and it's really fun to taste these wines. It's not as fun as being in Reims, but
But when will you come back?
Knock on wood. As soon as
the
it's
first
possible.
day you can go.
As soon as it's possible.
The best is to know that you are well, and that people continue to believe in Champagne. And the first thing for us is that I think that it's probably the most beautiful thing to do today is to drink a glass of champagne to make you happy.
Well, it's certainly not going to hurt. Let's put it that way. So I'm going to have a little.
Thank you so much, Antonio, for all you are doing for those wines, and see you soon.
Okay, thank you, Vitalie. Cheers.